Dear Professor Leslie Greenberg, thank you so much for accepting to have this conversation. As a psychotherapist, I have been learning from your books since decades, from your articles and video sessions, and it's an honor for me to host you here in Lisbon. Emotion-focused therapy now has a new website, as much as I know, the Emotion-Focused Therapy Clinic, dedicated to the training and the certification of EFT, right? Could you tell us a little bit about how this EFT training and certification program is structured?
Well, firstly, I should mention it's not exactly dedicated to a certification.
Okay.
And this is quite a complicated issue because I have very complex feelings about certification. But it is dedicated to training. And then there's a strong push from people to want certification.
Yes, they love certification.
Yes. And my younger colleagues all think it's important to certify people, but I'm actually opposed to certification
in a way.
Principle, but okay. I think it's probably necessary. But yes, so at York University we have a psychology clinic for the community at large. This has recently been set up by the psychology department, and within that we've created an emotion-focused therapy clinic dedicated to training, and ultimately, and it's only been going for 2 years at this, or this is the second year. So we want to also do an externship there so that people could come and actually get supervision and so on. But otherwise we do trainings based there, but also I do trainings all around the world.
Yes.
And there we have 3 levels of training, level 1, 2, and 3. But my belief is it takes many years to make a psychotherapist and to train and so on. So
I much agree with you. So how do trainees progress in EFT training usually? How long does this process take, and how many years on average does it take to complete the training? Are there major difficulties or obstacles?
Well, I mean, the main group of people who I trained initially were all my students at university, and some colleagues. And they really were with me for 6 to 8 years and a little longer. And then the trainings that we do, you see, it's very different in the different contexts. In North America, training is done within a PhD program.
Yes.
In Europe, it's done outside, and there's actually more intensive psychotherapy training. So it's not possible in North America, or we haven't yet set up like a 2-year training program. So in Canada, we have a 4-day level 1, a 4-day level 2, then supervision, and then level 3 is a supervision, group supervision where people come and bring tapes. But I really recommend supervision as a very important part of the training process, but people are free to seek that as they choose, right? In Europe, we've been setting up 2-year training programs, and I think that's more substantial. There are 3 difficulties. One is people generally need to be trained in empathy at a deep level, but they don't believe that they need to be trained in that. So there's some process by which people come to learn that they need to. This is not true with students. When we start with students, they do 1 or 2 years of training basically in empathy. When you say, are there difficulties, I think the issue is the training has to be experiential. You have to work with emotion, and you have to work with yourself. So that's not a difficulty. Usually, people are aware when they come in. So the training is personal, where people are clients. They don't role play clients. They actually work on their own issues.
Their own selves.
Their own selves. So, that's a complicated
process.
Form of training.
Yes. So as a more ambitious model, promising a deeper and enduring change, could we say EFT is a model that is more difficult to practice, and eventually is a model that is more difficult to teach and train?
Yes, definitely. I mean, you see, it depends. There are contrasts. There was psychoanalysis on the one hand, which I think was complicated and required 5 years of analysis. So, and then there was CBT on the other hand, which produced modules, and people got this idea that you could train briefly. And it was a set of strategies. So, I mean, I see EFT as much more complex than the modules, but not as demanding as a psychoanalytic training. But I would say that 2 years is a sort of basic unit of time that you need to train. And yes, the skills are quite complex, so that it takes a long, I mean, 2 years is a minimum, and then you keep learning and developing.
A minimum 2 years, yes. EFT is structured around different tasks. Process tasks, relational, empathy-based tasks, experiencing tasks, process tasks, enactment tasks, the chair ones. From your experience, are there fundamental principles or tasks that somehow are more complex and difficult to teach and train?
I mean, that's an interesting question, and I mean, in some way, empathy is probably the most difficult to train, but the simplest to train in. I mean, because it's just, but to actually develop this sort of, this capacity to truly be empathic is extremely complex. And we don't really know how to train in that. We can train in the enactment tasks and the other tasks because they're all things that you do. Whereas, I mean, I've written papers called Ways of Being and Ways of Doing. And ways of being are much more complex.
Of course.
And ways of doing are easy to teach. But the chair dialogues are also, I mean, I do see the self-critical work and unfinished business work as the most central. They're the most fundamental because I think they're universal problems that people suffer from regardless of the kind of problems that they come in. And those are complex to teach as well.
How do the training in EFT progresses in Europe? I've heard that you are now training a lot in Europe too, as well as Elliot and others of your model. And what opportunities are there for the training?
Well, I mean, we are doing trainings in different countries now, and the model that I'm trying to develop is a 2-year training program. So there's one in Germany, there's one in Norway. I'm doing a lot of that in Switzerland, and Robert and Elliot and Jean Watson are doing a training program in the Netherlands. And then we're starting a 2-year training program in Italy, in Rome. Those are sort of training programs. But the problem is that they're in English, but some of the training goes on in the language of that country when we're not directly supervising people, usually in a group.
Oh, there are local supervisors.
Or no, even when we're there, sometimes they talk in their own language when I'm not directly in the room, because we break into small groups. So when I'm not in the room, then they work in their own language. When the trainer comes into the room,
then they turn into English.
So, yeah, but we're also trying to develop local supervisors in local languages. And of course, there's a possibility of trying to develop something here in Portugal.
And how has been your training experience in Portugal and Spain? I know that you also visit Spain often. Do you find exactly the language somehow an obstacle for the training?
I haven't, but because I do it in English.
Yes.
And the people do it in English, so it actually works quite well. And in fact, it seems to me, I mean, I think this is accurate, that Portuguese have greater facility in English than I've experienced in Spain. And in Spain, I've done some minimal training, but there hasn't been a major effort to get a training program off the ground. So there hasn't been as much of a following in Spain.
Okay. there is no, as much as I know, there is no institute or organization devoted to EFT training and promotion. Why is that? I know that somehow when you developed the EFT method, you suffered the pressure to give it a name, and that you would prefer not to have another model to the already crowded world of psychotherapy models.
Right.
Has anything to do with this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I started off studying how people change. I mean, I did have a commitment to a humanistic approach, but I'm much more interested in really understanding how people change and developing those kinds of methods. So the school wars are not attractive at all, and then creating another school, EFT, was not what I really wanted. But then there are a lot of political forces involved. This is very political. And then also when we created emotionally focused couples therapy and we did an outcome study, because I didn't really believe in outcome studies as much as process studies, but I saw how quickly that became recognized and how much attention it got because there was an outcome study and because it had a name. Eventually I decided that it was necessary to do that. And of course we first also called the individual therapy process experiential therapy, staying within the humanistic kind of framework, but eventually I felt that it was very important to call it emotion-focused therapy because that's what we were focusing on, and also because that was a contrast with cognitive therapy.
Okay, so you don't really feel that EFT needs an organization to facilitate?
So, I mean, I just was not organizationally motivated. I mean, there were too many other things and too much. We are now discussing and have decided that we will create an international society. I would like to call it the International Society for the Study of Emotion-Focused Therapy.
Okay.
And that will include people around the world who are studying or training in EFT. So, I mean, there is this evolving need to do that. But there's an interesting story, which is Rogers never wanted to form a Rogerian society. And client-centered therapy essentially died in North America. In the Netherlands, in Germany, they created client-centered organizations, and client-centered lived on there. So you do need organizations in order for people to organize, essentially. Yes. But it's not where my talent or interest lies.
I see. Okay, before we turn our topic into EFT evolution, do you want to add anything on this topic of training?
No, I think good.
Okay. Okay, good. So we turn our topic.